Very good evening. I'm architect Manjari Krishnamoorthy, working as an assistant professor in School of Architecture and Interior Design as Ar.Manjari TTR. I'm here today to teach you theory of architecture subject from the first year of Bachelor of Architecture BR course. So in today's topic, I would like to screen share the first unit of theory of architecture. So here we are just going to deeply understand what exactly is architecture? What is the definition of an architecture? Architecture is derived from a Latin word, architecton, which is the mastermind of a construction uh, uh, type. So, whereas architecture can has several other meanings. It can be the science, the art of constructing buildings, but also trying to work out on proportions, the rules that determine the holistic character and demonstration of any other buildings, either the what kind of a style of a building or what is the ideal way of construction. So this is how the evolution has started upon. So architecture has varied meanings upon different perspectives of people. It can also be the approach that a humankind would take over, and it's also the purest forms of how music or poetry can also be defined as. So, talking about the general definition of architecture, it is also the art and science of designing and building structures. And also, it not need not be just one building structure, but a large group of structures. It will also have an aesthetic, a functional criteria, will have a structural component in accordance to several other principles that we will be studying upon. So how do we actually approach the definition of architecture? It can be an organic entity, and it can has multiple components. For example, like how a human portray himself. We dress up, we will have accessories, we will have shoes. Likewise, a building will also have an entity where it has a form, it has a function, it has a structure, skin, and it will have several other materials used, and it will have circulations, a basic character that identifies the building or the built structure. And it can also have several other elements. When you talk about a building, it will have floors, walls, columns, roofs, and several other attributes. Talking about the way in which it takes the form, what kind of a building? Is it a rectilinear building? Is it a circular building? So that is the way of how a space making or a form making happens. And this will have components of a line, plane, and a volume. So where exactly the architecture started upon? So talking about the origin, so we all know how the human evolution has started about how humans started living in caves and how from caves we have transformed into different mediums of shelter. So when shelter comes upon, that is the natural way of how we improve a man's action with the configuration of the land that we get in. So we started living in huts, nests, tents, and then we started making our own structures, built forms as such. So, like how in based upon different situations and different climatical considerations. So, in a place like a drive, we started finding shelter in caves. Whereas where it's in the cold region where ice is, we started building igloos. So trying to make the composite of what exactly is the built and the surrounding situation is all about. So that is how the evolution starts. So this goes on for generations and generations. In the first generations, that's where approximately in year 3000 BC, we started about knowing about the ziggurat forms in Mesopotamia, and we also know the palaces of Babylon, all the Hindu temples of India, the pagodas, the palaces of China, Japan. So all these, the Mayan and the Inca civilizations have monumental temples that are there in the ancient Greece. So these are categorized as the first generation where the origin of architecture began. And in the second generation, we started to explore more about your building materials, what kind of building materials, not only stone construction, because that was locally available there. So from taking the basic constitute of stone, we started making bricks, handmade bricks. That becomes the masonry type, the concrete. So that's how, from the basic structural element, we started developing into different architectural typologies. Whereas arches, starting to build using wood, and we also tried to raise up on the shelter. So we the covering that the built form would need. So this is how the diversification of the functionality of the construction technology had started about in the second generation. Whereas in the third generation, we started to explore more about the technical advancements that we have, like how post your industrial revolution, how machineries had helped us. So reducing the human load, but also increasing the productivity. So in the 19th century, what has happened? So we are seeing that new materials, the invention of glass, cement, quality steels, aluminium, all these new materials have improved their features in the construction industries. So applying all these technologies, we are trying to do influencing our materials into advancement, having typology of precast, modular structures, space train structures, trying to explore different forms. So these are categorized in your third generation. So this is how we have seen the passage of evolution. So talking about the context, what exactly does a human need? So a human will have basic requirements. Either it can be the influence, whatever I see, wherever I get inspired or influenced. So that will help me to lead to a concept or a style. And what does the nature exist? So we are not totally depending on the aesthetic side, but also trying to observe what the nature gives us and what do we give back to the nature. And the influence of man, what does my likes and dislikes? So these are the categories that we will personify ourselves into as human needs. So talking about the physical needs. So what do we need for our survival? The basic clothing, the transportation, power, electricity, our ecological balance between our nature and environment. We need good educations, medical facilities. Above all this happens under a shelter. The basic necessities what a house would need. Just by building structure, we will not be in comfort or safety, but we will also need some aesthetics and some protection, which is in the form of construction that we would require. So either it can be in the form of doors, different types of doors, sanitation facilities, and also windows, because we need maximum amount of natural ventilation, air and ventilation, and to our convenience. So when we design, we always see what exactly the movement or the circulation within the house will always happen. From living, how do I move to the dining space? So, how is the kitchen space closer to the dining space? So, the proximity. So, that happens with the convenience of the users who are living there. So, that gives us comfort. For example, in a hot region, obviously, air conditioning will be one solution that we would be looking at. So, that will give the comfort to the user criteria living there. So, and we also have emotional needs. For example, the preferences that a human would have. I might like my room painted in the color of a blue. Also, or I might want some rustic feel given to the structure. So, human will also have emotional needs, which will enhance their creativity, but also gives equal comfort when they are given what exactly they need. And intellectual needs. So, apart from any building setup that we do, we will also have an intellectual part. So, it has to be an utilitarian building. Utilitarian building meaning buildings that are being used by humans, which are providing the solving the purpose. So, and also try without compromising the beauty or the aesthetics of the structures or the interiors. So, talking about the whole context of how architecture has evolved, we are trying to observe with certain points like how do we actually aspire to be? So, starting from the desire of preservation, meaning starting from clothing, the type of civilization that we live under. And we also have recognition. Any man that would live will also have a status or a position or a ambition towards their social life and also a societal life. So they will have a struggle in regaining a position. So we will always try to keep on upgrading ourselves. So from a person, we also develop into a graduate. From a graduate, you will always get a job. So there has to be some evolution that takes us through all of these communities. And also desire for response. Response in the sense we are trying to have a bonding with the local. We are also trying to build companionship with our fellow creatures who are with us, and also trying to build more amount of semi-public buildings. So not only as a personal confined space, but also trying to have a whole living within the existing society. And also self-expression. Self-expression is the urge of a man where himself he addresses like an individual. So where the highest forms, we are trying to build other aesthetic facilities like theater, museums, all these public spaces, sport arena, which will always try to habituate. For example, I might have a habit or a passion towards sports. So these all of these semi-public buildings will also try to provide our self-expression where we are trying to not just confine with the living walls, but also try to explore. And then all of on top of all of this, there has to be an influence of nature. Nature without nature, we cannot live or coexist. So climate, topography, all of these influence our life and the habits of nation. So what kind of climate do we live? What kind of seasonal changes that we adapt ourselves to? So all of this create an architecture with the local and the national characteristics. And talking about a climate, as you can see in the picture, there are the same typology, but then there is some difference between all of them. So in the first picture, you can see there's a hut, and can you see what exactly is the man wearing? So how does it constitute to the environment or the climate he lives in? Whereas here in the second image, you can see there's a stone structure, and you can see he's all suited up. Whereas in the third image, you can see there's a structure made of ice, something similar to an igloo. And you can see something where they are trying to create a very suited dress. So in all of these things, we are trying to just understand how architecture has evolved or changed with the help or with the reference to the changing climate. Okay, and also the difference of different climates that we are under and topography. This is basically of how different broader sense of how the general terrain or the contour of the surface where the entire country is looking like. So where you in this image you can see there's a cliff and you see on top of the cliff the living happens. So this is some very similar to the nature where we are trying to retain what exactly the nature is given to us and try to make a living out of it. So this is the reference of how nature also can influence and different types of materials. So we all know brick or concrete is not the only existing materials. We have several other materials, several other aggregates. We have even in wood, we have different types of woods. Talking about different types of stones, limestone, marble, granites. All of this are different materials which will be used under different circumstances and climates. So that will change for a stone construction where you will have cold region, bamboo usage. All of this are different materials that we see in existence. And social conditions of a man, where we are trying to have permanent settlement and also reflecting our social structure of a period that is developed. And you can also see how the people can dictate the appearance of the buildings, where if you go take the city fabric of Amsterdam, you can see the language of how the buildings are all throughout, but they have a similar characteristics that are being retained throughout the whole city. That exactly means is for us to understand the social condition. And then the human personality. So if you compare yourself with the personality of a nation, where exactly do we live? How the architecture affects on them. So either it can be a simple way or a complexity of how the existence inhabitants try to control their development of their architecture. And then the interest, as you can see in this image, like how I want my house to be. I want a house to be looking like a very minimalistic structure. If you take example of Robert Venturi, he created something like a duck house where the structure itself resembles like a duck. So everybody will have their personal preferences. So how you want your structure to be. So that exactly is your man's interest. So now we are getting into topics of how exactly all this theory begins in. So this is an example of a virtuous book that is very useful. And we also have the book of D.K. Ching, Form Space Order. These are the Bible books that for any architecture student would definitely need for a reference. So throughout our passage of 5 years of course, that is the reference material that to understand the basics and fundamentals that you can refer on. So this helps us understand what exactly is a function, okay, and what exactly is your user, who is your user, and what does he need. So use, and now we are going to see points of how functional aspects of architecture is there. So use and user function. So function can also refer into intenses where you're trying to use the space and what kind of activity that we perform. So everybody can have pet. You can see you can have multiple activities going on in your space. You have a reading corner. You have a TV space. You might have an indoor court. So the function changes from the whole space. The technical part of it, the technical function where you will see structural and mechanical systems are very important and crucial, which is the main constraint talking about your site and how we develop the requirements and what are the building technologies that we need in current date trends. And environmental consideration. So we do not forget how do we start. So whatever we do, there has to be a response towards the environment and the context. So we that's why we always do a site analysis before we get into the projects. We will thoroughly study about what is the local climate, what are the environmental aspects that are being to be considered in our project development. And also talking about your economic function. So there are two approaches that we can also always see. So the where when you talk about the regional way where you have a response towards climate conservation of materials, locally available materials. All this is the economic approach, where the sustainable approach. You will also have an basic investment done, where you also have MNC turnkey projects that can be taken over also for large scale construction, where the functional level will also have a business logic, where you see lots of apartments that are being built where you will invest some amount of money. So those are the economical ways. So it is up to us how we take up the environmental situation for our projects. And the symbolic representation. The symbolic function is always monumental in scale. It has a representation. It gives an identity of having a cultural value to our project. As you can see, Taj Mahal is a very cultural notion. It's one of the world wonder. You can also see what kind of history and value and identity that it holds in a country. So that is the symbolic meaning. The next we see the aesthetic approach. The aesthetic, how do we try to have a philosophic study over the expressing the beauty and the taste of the structure instead of just building very mundane structures? We will always try to bring the any new techniques, something very unique about our design. So when we categorize all these points of aesthetic aspect of architecture, all this are mastered from the designer of basically following the key points. So the first one would be mass, space, proportion, symmetry, balance, contrast, pattern, decoration, and massing. We will be seeing all of these points, the key points, in detail. So the philosophical aspect. So how is the building environment tried to base on our human needs? What are the factors that would an individual need to play a society in this, to play a role in this society? And how we also concentrate on the population at the same time. How color impacts, how lights impact, and how are the spaces creating a sense of security and danger, calmness, comfort, frustration, fear? All of this are coexisting within the user's preference. Okay, architecture is all about your significant role in shaping our thinking, actions, performance, moods, and behavior. So now we are going to see what are the architectural components that we will be requiring. So before, when we know about architecture, so we are trying to deeply understand what is architecture, not only just designing buildings, but we're just trying to figure out the roots of it. So the first one will be the site. Site is basically a place where the construction takes place, where we will have the work. The land or area will be designated for a specific development and where they try to propose a building. Site will also have a site boundary or definition of the area which the building or the space will be designed. And the architect will design the structure based on the site conditions. So each and every site will be unique. You might get a, square form site, you might get a very weird form, linear form. So that depends on your client's requirements or the existing conditions. So it can be a contour site, it can be an lake facing site, it can be placed on a cliff. So all the complexities differs from one place to another. So when you go on to an empty site, you will have to do some clearance for the land that has to be suitable for construction. So we will always try to analyze and work it out what exactly are the pre-existing structures, document that, and try to make solutions out of it. So as you can see, this is an example of how a site analysis can be done. They are trying to just demarcate where exactly is the site, where are the routes and access roads, what kind of noises do we get, because that influences our site. And we will also see where exactly is the natural drain, what are the nearby neighborhood context, what are the surrounding buildings, where exactly do we have transportation facilities, nearest bus stand. All of this are the basic elements that we will figure out to understand our potential of our site. Next, talking about the form, in art and design, we always try to have a very structure of a work. So you want to build a structure. You will always figure out whether you want to do extrusion or you just want to do something very linear. So this is how the composition works to understand. So it can be a shape. Shape is nothing but the outline. The size is nothing but it gives you volume, the form, proportions, or the scale. Color, which has a visual balance. Texture is how you feel or sense the material. Position is ideally the location. And then the orientation, where exactly do I have to position my structure? So all of these points help us understand how form can be situated or positioned in a site. And then, as you can see, these are the examples. So this is the Modern Art Museum, where done by architect called Oscar Niemeyer, where he's just trying to have an very different, which is like a funnel, like a structure. Where this is by Franco Gehry, the Walt Disney Concert Hall, where you can see a very abstraction of structures that have been done. So these are few examples of different forms all over the world. So this is Fatehpur Sikri. As you can see, stacking was done. And here, this is the United Habitation by Le Corbusier, the House of Stabio. So all of these are different buildings based on different forms and figures. The Lingaraja Temple, and then the Sydney Opera House, the Lotus Temple, which typically denotes like an lotus. And then talking about a structure. So we all know deeply understand what exactly is construction, trying to build multiple stories and everything. But multiple stories will also have a fixed location where it's placed on the ground. It will have look like schematically try to have all the parts put together, and this connecting parts will create a building. So you will start building the foundation and lay the foundation. After that, you will have the structure of your first ground structure, and above that you will have your first floor. So all of this are for us to understand how the structure works. So you might have a vertical support column and you might have an horizontal support, that's a beam. So that is how we will try to always figure out how the construction of a multi-story building works. And these are the, as you can see, these are the different other building components that we have. You will have a terrace, you will have a first floor, these are the walls, roof, building services, where you have your pipelines, air conditioning, all of it done, your sewage system. You will have a ceiling, you will have plasters, windows. All of this is a clear understanding of how, what exactly a structure can constitute. The roof. Roof is nothing but a shelter which is on the top face of the building. It either can be flat, sloped, it can be pitched. That changes from one location to another. Parapet. Parapet is nothing but a short wall which is 3 feet high, where on a terrace, like how you stand and just look around. So that is like uh, a wall which is going to serve as a protection also for people who are trying to use the roof. Lintel. Lintel is nothing but the level where you have your door openings or the window openings, where the structure will support the whole weight of the wall and also try to give an opening. The next one is your beams, the beams and slab, as I already said. So the vertical support is called as the column, the horizontal support is called as the beam. On top of this, where the whole flat surface rests, that's called as the slab. So that's where your whole load gets distributed. On the bottom, you can also see there's a footing. Footing is nothing but your foundation, where before they starting construction, they will try to have a strong base which is going to be elevating the whole beam and slabs. So this is like an RCC structure, the reinforced cement concrete. So this is one such example. So now we are going to see smaller details of how all these attributes, as I told you, column, the vertical member of the built form. So as you can see, you will have a primary beam, that is the main running beam, and then you will have secondary beams that are supporting the whole structure. And here you see a slab, and this is the foundation. Damp proofing. Damp proof course is nothing but a layer of waterproofing material that is applied on the basement level to prevent the rise of surface water into the walls. So it will not get so much of water content on the structure. So the walls are constructed over the damp proof course. At least 150 mm above the ground will be your damp proofing course, which is basically protection. So, and then you have walls. The walls are the vertical elements that gives our divisions. Like how if you build walls, only two rooms can be separated. So that is basically the defining element or that creates an enclosure and protects against the wind, sunshine, and rain. And the openings. So provided in the walls will also provide ventilation and access to the buildings. Floors. Floors are the surface that is being laid on your plinth level, which has a variety of materials that are being done. So you can use tiles, granites, marbles, concrete. So all of this flooring and ground will also be properly compacted and leveled. And then staircase. Staircase are the vertical transportation from one level to another. It's a sequence of steps that connects from the ground floor to the first floor and several other floors. The space is occupied that is called as the stairway. And you have different types of staircases. Either it can be a wood stair, RCC, and the form of staircase will also change. You have straight flight, you have dog legs, etc. And then the plinth beam. So these are the basic understanding of what are the architectural components that you will need to understand what exactly is a structure. So plinth beam is the beam structure that is constructed either at the above the ground level to take up the load of the wall that is coming around. So as you can see, this is the image of how the plinth will be constructed. So you have a foundation laid and you have three levels of footing, first, second, and third level of footing, which is going to strengthen our base, and here will be the ground, and then you will have a sand filling. So here they will try to have the plinth height. Okay, so that will be basically 0.6 meters, 2 feet, and then on top of that you will have a brick wall and the damp proofing course. Foundations. Foundations are the structural unit which is uniformly trying to distribute the load from the structure to the underlying soil. Then only it will have strength from the base earth to the structure. So that's the first structural unit that we will be constructing in any building construction. So a good foundation is the settlement or the baseline for the structure. And then building skins. Building skins are nothing but exteriors or a lightweight non-structural outer facing, or it can be a cladding or any layer of a wall or a component. It may also be referred to as a facade of the building. Facade is nothing but the skin. Everything is the same. We call that as elevation also. A skin is the material where it can be overlapping in the building. So in few other designers will also have a wall, and also from 1 feet from the wall or 2 feet from the wall, they will always try to have a skin. So that is also serving as a protection from the climatic conditions, but also to elevate the aesthetics or the innovative part of the materials that they use as an external surface. That will also become the integral part of the building. So one example is your Henin License University building, and you can also observe this in your Pearl Academy of Jaipur. So where they also have a facade skin. So the skin has different other materials, application, the aesthetic quality, technical possibilities, where each and every skin will also act based on different purposes and different other integrated functions. Here you can see different examples of how they're trying to have influences on the exterior. So it also created an openness, but also created a closure towards their structures. This is the Ohio State University, where you can see the water plant has been tried to creating an enclosure. So the main important feature is that the functional aspect of linking the skin and building facade. The second skin is compared to the biological creature. The third skin is to involve the buildings. Materials, as we already see, what are the different types of materials that are being used? Clay, rocks, sand, wood, even twigs and leaves. All of these are considered as materials which were naturally occurring and are also man-made products that are being used in current day market. So these materials are chosen about different other factors: aesthetic effect, cost efficiency, climate control, textural cognitive effects. Talking about materials, you will see the invention of steel after your industrial revolution. Steel was one important building material, which is the strongest and also the primary structural material for skyscrapers and large scale buildings, large tall buildings also. So this provides the extensional strength to the structures. Lately, steel was observed that the aesthetic facade material will also act as an decorative roofing material in some other region. This is the strata center by Frankfurt. And concrete. Now, how in India fundamentally concrete was a new material after architects like Louis Kahn, Le Corbusier try to purposefully use concrete as a building material, but also try not compromising the aesthetics of the structure. So this concrete has different attires and functions, and also it is one of the concrete production has observed that it has the highest carbon footprints, which later pollutes the environment. The latest technology where scientists have tried to explore that the concrete has emerged more sustainable and aesthetic element. So this will have different constitutes. You will have bond beams, CMU blocks, which gives you a facade finish. So you don't have to repaint or refurbish your structure. You can leave it as such, so that remains very brutalist in nature. Glass. So we all know the transparency that the material gives, and also the lightweightness that you can see, which will directly help us provide daylighting into the space. So by technology, we are also trying to invent new materials of glass, low E glasses, where electrochromic glasses, where it reduces the transmitting by 90%, but also resulting lesser grad and higher energy savings. So that is why most of the glass are being used in your IT buildings also, and many other skyscrapers. Brick. So very common and profoundly known building material, available in different sizes, materials, and shapes, widely used as a structural material also, and try to explore the innovation that can be attained in your aesthetic bricks, where it can be a facade material by itself. But also without compromising, they are trying to create wall partitions, boundaries, which casting shadow Laurie Baker is one of the person who widely used brick in all of his structures. So where the beauty of the brick and the composite nature of the brick is it's so true to nature, and it coexists with the local environment and nature. So that is how we try to use the materials efficiently. Wood, as considering that is one of the old material in the construction industry, which is provided as the most sustainable technologies, and also mass timber production. Stone construction, that is very diversely used, starting from the beginning of our different evolution of generations. And other architectural components where your services, your electrical lines, MEP, your engineering, mechanical services, your communication lines, your escalator, lifts, all of this plays a key role as a services for the building. Circulation, where you try to always have movement from one place to another. Either it can be vertical transportation or the horizontal transportation. Approach, where it can be a direct approach, an oblique approach. So these are the ways in which the circulation system helps us experience the spaces within the building. Okay. Frontal approach, oblique approach, where you have a perspective, where you have a redirected and then try to approach the building. Spiral approach, you will always take a turn, move around the perimeter and try to have an opening towards that. So these are the few examples taken by taken from the book called From Space Order by B.K. Chin, where these examples directly help us understand how entries work. All these diagrams are taken from that. So this is an example of a direct approach. Here you can see public approach and different entrances. So these diagrams help us clearly understand how do we separate from one place to another. And these are the different types of openings where you can see there's a spiral, there's an arch, there's an circular entry where there's some articulation done. So this is a projected eave. Here you can see there is a recession. So these are called the flush, projected, and recessed. So I would like to stop here and continue the same circulation, the architectural component circulation entrance in the part two of the video of Unit 1, Theory of Architecture. Thank you. Keep watching.